I don't know what exactly kicks in there, but it's just so sweet. It's simply wonderful.
That front tire was glued to the asphalt and gives an incredible feeling.
Nice, right?
So for me, this is a motorcycle that's just from a previous era, generationally speaking.
Adventure Test Ride, which is a test of mid-size adventure motorcycles in real-world conditions, which we conducted in Andalusia. Together, we tested 9 motorcycles on asphalt, gravel, and light off-road, basically in the kinds of places where these bikes are actually used in the real world. We invite you to join our discussion, where we'll try to pick the best motorcycle and the one we'd most like to have in our own garage. We're speaking honestly and without holding back about our riding impressions, as well as the pros and cons of each motorcycle.
Gentlemen, let's talk about motorcycles. Adventure Test Ride. Together we covered a few kilometers on asphalt and gravel roads. We tested 9 different motorcycles from the mid-size adventure segment. For me, it was a real pleasure to host you here and to ride with you. And I had a great time. First question for you. Which motorcycle performed best off-road for you? No?
It's not going to be easy, right? I'm probably boring by now, but after working in the motorcycle world for about 1.5 or 2 years, I always say that it's really tough during these tests because nowadays there are no bad motorcycles, there are only better and worse ones, and we're just picking out the nuances. What Tomek said is true. He already had a bit of an opinion formed, but testing everything in one place is the best way to do it. And that's how you can really pick out those nuances. I'll put it this way. I ride a bit of cross-country myself sometimes. I ride a proper motocross bike. And now, off-road, the Yamaha Ténéré appealed to me the most. Why? Mainly because I love riding in that motocross style, sitting down, putting weight on the front, shifting myself far forward. Then I started to like the BMW, although by that point I realized the BMW is super versatile, but it's not as good off-road as the Ténéré. I saved the Ducati for the last day. That Ducati also handles off-road really well. Basically, I'm torn between the Ténéré and the Ducati is almost on par with the BMW. I think I'll sum it up like this. If it was heavier off-road terrain, I'd take the Ténéré. If it's fast gravel roads, it's hard for me to choose now, but it would be either the BMW or the Ducati. Both have their strong points, and I'm sorry, but I can't pick one.
What about the Husky? It has the best suspension.
No, listen, I was put off by the Husqvarna on the very first day, despite the really nice and very refined engine performance, the good suspension, and so on. To be honest, Husqvarna lost me simply because I can't find a comfortable standing riding position on it. And I think that's very important in the adventure world. I don't feel comfortable on it. I didn't have any fun at all, unlike on the asphalt. But I'm sorry, on typical gravel terrain, when riding standing up, the Husqvarna is one of my last choices. But
what you said about the Ténéré, I also think it's an awesome motorcycle when it comes to really tough terrain. You can really beat it up and it'll get through. It won't overheat. Basically, nothing will happen to it. But again, on a lot of nice roads, on those faster sections, you can feel that it's lacking power. And unfortunately, that takes away all the fun from riding. On those slower and more demanding sections where you have to climb or it's more technical, it's a truly exceptional and capable motorcycle. But on fast corners, pretty much all of the excitement and fun of riding this bike just disappears. And that's exactly where, like you said, the BMW or Ducati really begin to stand out and shine. But then again, when you get into the really tough terrain, I think they'd have quite a bit more trouble handling it.
However, I truly think the Yamaha is the absolute best among the cheapest options available, because it's a very inexpensive motorcycle compared to the whole group. And I really believe it's money best spent in the long run.
Because the Yamaha doesn't have that much horsepower and is a pretty simple design, it's super reliable. This RK has been on the market for about 10
years and
basically this motorcycle just doesn't break down.
And later, the maintenance of this motorcycle is also much better.
If I had to choose a motorcycle for an around-the-world trip in the adventure style, because these motorcycles are generally made for that purpose, then even though the Ténéré definitely wouldn't be my #1 choice, I think I would seriously consider not choosing the Ténéré precisely because it's such a reliable workhorse. You just ride it,
and with it,
you know that nothing's going to happen to it.
The availability of service and parts and probably its worldwide popularity, that's definitely a plus. And what's cool about the Ténéré is that button that lets you very quickly switch to off-road mode.
Only now, because this is the latest model, we have it, but
before you only had the ABS mode and there was no traction control.
And I think that's an incredibly important thing, because in the mode we were riding in here, and Adam, who you could basically call a local, was really leading us. The terrain was changing very quickly. Road, gravel, road, gravel. You know, with some bikes, you could just switch modes on the fly, like with the Ténéré, but unfortunately, some bikes required you to stop and switch to another riding mode, or like with the Triumph, if you turned it off and started it again, it would automatically reset, and there was still something else that had to be done with the Triumph and the Honda.
But you know what? With the Ténéré, from what I remember, I think you also have to stop. You can't switch modes while riding because you might accidentally skip over it.
From
Off-road, you can turn that mode on, but to switch back, I think you have to stop, right?
Yeah, I'd say it's actually quite fast.
Because there's just one button, which is better. I had the Ténéré for a year and a half, and it's true that I can't really fault this motorcycle for anything, but on the other hand, it's not the kind of bike that really, it's quite unique to me. And for example, it didn't really click with me that much. And that's just how I feel about it. For example, that structurally, it seems to me like it's built a bit as if it was supposed to be a rally bike where you just sit on the motorcycle, not in it at all, kind of like a perch. And it's also a bit stiff. I get the impression that everything is really tightly integrated. The suspension is kind of average.
Sorry.
You're right. We're talking about the rally version. In the rally version, the front is great, but the rear is still just average. That's how I feel. I honestly have to say that I truly and deeply enjoy every single aspect of this quite a lot, more than I can even put into words.
The riding position, especially in this rally version, because I'm tall. For me, the riding position on a motorcycle means much more than anything else, especially off-road.
The Ténéré is generally the second longest motorcycle in the whole lineup. The Desert is the longest, and the Ténéré comes right after it.
You're talking about the riding position, that the seat is quite narrow and you sit high on the bike, making it easy for you to stand up.
It doesn't lock the rider into one position. You can sit on it like on a motocross bike. You can even sit on the tank like a passenger.
That's how it's built.
It's easy to balance it, but
it has a high center of gravity.
Precisely because it is exceptionally narrow. It is also significantly easier to coordinate the movements of your body on climbs and maneuver the bike underneath you.
Listen, this engine, it doesn't have that top end. It's too weak, but it has a very good low end. And that low end is very controllable. I mean, the Ducati jerks the chain, and many other bikes do too. They're very twitchy. I won't even mention how twitchy they can be, either stalling or...
It doesn't jerk at all. Not even a little. You feather it gently with the rear brake and it still keeps going like a tractor.
It's pretty much the same as in Honda. Honda also has engines that rev up really nicely.
Go ahead and screw it into place. This is exactly how it should look.
What we said, that there are low compression ratios and this engine runs softly, and also the sound is nice because of that.
So if we move so smoothly to the Transalp, I will immediately say that one thing and another. If we compare the Transalp, it drives like that, and I think that it has power only at the top.
Yeah, exactly.
However, the Ténéré has a really impressive low-end torque, but it's worth noting that
it doesn't have a top end, but
it doesn't have a top end, and here the Transalp has a nice top end, so...
For fast riding, it would be better to have a Ténéré with the Transalp's engine, right?
But when you rev it high, right, that...
With brother-in-law Slapper...
I'll just say two more quick words about the Transalp. The rear suspension was constantly bottoming out on me, even when I was just sitting there, you know?
I didn't ask, but you know, because you just don't ask, but...
Get me...
Maybe I'd have to change it.
I just want to point out the, let's say, more affordable segment of these Chinese bikes, and personally, the CFMoto 800 made quite a good impression on me because it's a motorcycle that really doesn't lack much, and in fact it's very strong in many areas, and I really think that among these... I haven't ridden the CFMoto 450 unfortunately, but just like the Cove, well, unfortunately for me it's bottom of the barrel. I mean, sorry, not bottom of the barrel. For me the Cove... No, sorry. For me it's a motorcycle that's just from a previous generation, from a different era. It's not well refined. It's not that it's total junk. You can ride it, and you can even have some fun with it.
You've really stirred the pot, because now there are quite a few passionate fans out there. It is actually truly quite a remarkable phenomenon.
It provides a really solid foundation for you to build your own custom motorcycle. You buy it relatively cheap, but you have to swap out the suspension.
And furthermore...
remap the engine.
But
in its stock version, it just doesn't deliver.
Events. I'm curious if it's possible to do something more with this motorcycle for a reasonable amount of money.
More?
Costs about what you put in.
Costs what you put in.
The base is really nice because this motorcycle is super agile and short off-road.
A little rascal.
Very
powerful.
When driving off-road, I honestly think it would do exceptionally well.
For me, it's too small. I don't know what I'd have to do to adapt it. Yeah, but a person
who's 180 centimeters tall, I think, could handle it. But honestly, as it comes out of the showroom now, even someone who's 180 centimeters tall can't really manage. Sorry, Camille.
Looked like he was riding a dog, right? Sorry.
But on the other hand, this motorcycle has a very specific build. For me, it felt like I was on a dirt bike.
Yes, that is exactly right.
Well, it is.
Pocket-sized.
The only problem is that on a dirt bike, you have to move your body forward towards the handlebars to turn and so on when you're riding more off-road. But on this motorcycle, because of the seat and the way it's built, where on an adventure class bike, most of the time you have to stand when you're off-road, there's nothing to brace yourself against. I got so tired on that round that after 30 minutes of riding, I could already feel it in my arms everywhere because I had to stay completely tense the whole time. There was nothing to brace myself against, nowhere to put my knees. I was sliding along the tank, so when I braked, I just flew forward, and when I accelerated too.
I just shoot forward, barely.
On top of that, the brake, I think this is the only motorcycle I've ridden where unfortunately the front brakes were sometimes better, sometimes worse, but the Kawi just had a really weak brake, and now riding off-road.
Going off-road is quite a thrill. No.
I haven't ridden a 450, but when riding off-road, where we often use just one finger on the brake because we have the levers set horizontally, and the standing position would require adjusting those levers, but nobody actually does that, so we usually brake with one finger. Well, these brakes aren't really one-finger brakes, and for me it ended up with the fact that I just couldn't brake with the front, and that's really crucial. That's why the Kawi is a bit of a wild thing. Today, while we were also shooting some video footage, the topic of throttle modulation came up. Listen, I was riding next to the cameraman and I just couldn't keep a steady speed on this bike because it was just...
It's the worst off-road. Today again, when I got on the Kawi, I twisted the throttle, waited, and nothing happened.
It is right over there. Just look.
Represents
a problem with a lot of play in the drivetrain, and then I realized, no, it's not play in the drivetrain, it's about throttle modulation. The throttle is just messed up.
Today I had a great comparison because we were riding a pretty long and very winding route off-road.
Yes.
And I was riding the Kawa. And just like I said a moment ago, I really struggled. And after half an hour, I could really feel it in my hands everywhere. And I thought, damn, we're not even riding super extreme or fast, but I got as tired as if I was in some kind of race.
Yeah.
And at the end of that route, Adam and I switched, and I got on the Triumph, a motorcycle that's 50 kilos heavier. And I got on and thought, wow, now this is nice.
It was a bit heavier in those tight turns, but that extra weight was much easier for me to manage with precise throttle control, gently with the clutch, whereas on the Cove, it was just a struggle to even make the turn at all. I think in the faster sections, it's easier on this motorcycle. If we shift into second or third gear, then the bike isn't as responsive to the throttle, and it's still fairly manageable to ride. But when we're dealing with tougher terrain or lower speeds, you really can save yourself. Listen, it's also worth mentioning the specifics of this terrain because there's a lot of loose stuff here. I mean, when there are fast gravel roads, I think the Kowa doesn't tire us out that much. But what we did today, those switchbacks winding over loose stones where you can't really pick up speed, you have to brake, take a tight turn, exit, and then it's already kicking up those stones behind you, and you're pulling away and you're constantly trying to keep control of everything. That was definitely very difficult. I actually had to sit down because standing up, it was just jerking me around too much. Yeah.
And another problem is that the clutch is so light and its range of motion is so short that you basically can't ride with the clutch half engaged at all. Not only is the engine aggressive, but the clutch's range of operation is also very short, which makes it practically impossible to soften the throttle response at all.
But actually, both of these big Chinese bikes and the CFMoto bikes are characterized by the fact that the clutch, even though it's cable operated, because I think only Ducati has a hydraulic one, works extremely lightly. The action is so light that it feels like it's hydraulic, but it's not. It's cable operated. Yeah.
All right, guys, but now Cove, this 800 is actually one of the models that sells really well on the forums, and a lot of people are buying it. Lots of horsepower and low weight, right? I guess that's the point, right?
What exactly?
Was it about 42,000 more or less?
That's not a low price.
But people look at those technical specs and,
But it's also nice and short, which is really a huge help off-road, right? That this motorcycle just jumps over everything and
so on. And it's also low, which is good for certain conditions. But now...
Let me ask you a bit differently. How would you rate the Cove in terms of, let's say you're competing in a cross-country rally, right? On adventure bikes?
No.
even though this particular machine is significantly heavier and much harder to handle safely if you happen to drop it, if you do not feel entirely confident with the engine's power, specifically meaning what you are doing with the throttle control at any given moment, you might find yourself struggling to maintain balance.
Then
you won't go fast.
It's different in cross-country because here we actually have some minor experience, and unfortunately it's a long distance, an hour or two depending. And here it's very important that the motorcycle doesn't wear you out and that the terrain doesn't beat you up. And listen, it's not about the bike being terrible, just so no one accuses us of anything here. It's a really great motorcycle, but if like a few lucky ones you have the chance to ride all of them at once and you can come here to Adam and experience it too, you'll probably say the same thing we do. But if you already have this motorcycle and you're riding it, I'm sure you're satisfied with it.
And to adapt to it, right?
Yeah.
It's not the kind of motorcycle you can't ride, because what I wanted to say is that these motorcycles also have everything that the other bikes we're comparing here have. It's just that sometimes there's simply less of it, like the suspension works a bit worse. Everything.
Yes, including that tablet, which I find tacky, and the controls, which are quite complicated. And as we said, no matter which riding mode you choose, it basically rides the same. You could just toss that tablet out and put in a Simpson speedometer, and honestly, it would be the same thing. So in that respect, it's nice that, as Tomek says, you don't have to play Tetris before you ride, because whatever you set, it's always the same.
Going back to the question, you guys are in love with the scenery, for example, in the winter, riding the cross bike in WLB mode? Yeah,
Exactly.
let's move on.
So we can get to the cross-country part.
Kamil, what's your choice? I'd like to break this down into 3 categories because I don't want to pick just one motorcycle. Just like Tomek wanted to show you here, and I do too, the terrain can be very different. We can have tough terrain, we can have muddy terrain, or we can have fast terrain like a gravel road where we're just flying along. And we might also have a section that's 30 kilometers to cover, or it could be 200 kilometers, right? And it's hard for me to pick one universal motorcycle because I don't think such a thing exists. You always have to choose
A compromise.
a compromise, and according to your own needs. Yes, subjectively.
And where and with whom?
Exactly. So here, what I wanted to do from the start was to present 3 motorcycles, and for my own needs, let's say I'd mostly ride on the street, sometimes go off-road, but not for super long trips, and I still want to have fun with it. I'd choose the BMW F900GS. Why do I feel comfortable on it when it comes to riding position? It's very stable because I already knew this motorcycle from the road before our test. Today, when I got to know it off-road, I was very pleasantly surprised that it felt the most stable to me, especially since we also had gravel roads, and when you're speeding up to 120 to 140 kilometers per hour on gravel, I did not even know I would be able to ride a motorcycle at all, and yet I felt completely stable. So for me it was a shock, because on other motorcycles the front end would wobble, they weren't all that comfortable for me to ride, and as for the power delivery in the BMW, this engine pulls really nicely from the very beginning, from low revs all the way up.
It has
A lot of power, and the electronics work really well there too. When I was riding off-road, I would ride without ABS and without traction control, but even with traction control on, it would still find its way somehow. So if you don't feel confident yet, it's great that you can, for example, ride without ABS but with traction control, and the motorcycle still moves forward nicely. If I had to tackle really tough terrain like sand or mud at low speeds, I would choose the E. Because for me, especially when changing direction or just the ease of handling, this motorcycle is really great. But what my friends also noticed here is that sometimes we start to miss that extra power. I also think it's a really nice motorcycle for beginners. Maybe it's a little bit too tall. That might be its only downside. But it's really great because it's easy to handle. There's also nothing like someone accidentally giving it too much throttle, for example. Because on something like a Tiger or a Husqvarna, that can result in a really big jerk. Or in a Ducati, which has a lot of torque,
BMC2 has a strong low end.
a really strong low end. So the Ténéré is good for tough terrain and shorter routes for myself. But if I really had to do a trip like 200 kilometers through some long stretch of terrain, I would choose the Husqvarna. Because I found that you have to position yourself on it a bit differently than on the other adventure bikes we're comparing here. But you definitely have to work more with your body, meaning that on those approach turns you really need to lean more forward, sometimes more to the back. But again, the shape of the seat itself actually made it surprisingly easy for me to brace myself with my legs. That it's not just about the tank, which is something I look for in motorcycles. And for example, the Ténéré does this really well because it also has these rubber pads here. I don't know what to call them, like grippy pads, but not exactly grippy pads here.
You can stick them on.
Yeah, I think I would add that to every bike, honestly. But still, when it comes to comfort, the Husqvarna wins if you're riding on, say, a flat gravel road. You can just sit down, or even while riding along, it's just more comfortable. And the only thing where it still has an advantage over all these other motorcycles for me is the suspension. Especially on the Ténéré, I felt like I was missing a bit of support from the suspension, particularly at the front. When I was riding on muddy terrain, it was very easy to lose the front end. Even at times I could feel it slipping away, so I'd stick my leg out to save myself. It would really dive into those corners. The BMW also has a lot of suspension travel, and when you're riding it, you can really feel how easy it is to load up the front, but also how easy it is to overload it. When you get on the gas, it really shifts the weight to the rear swing arm, so the force transfers are very significant. However, the suspension on the Husqvarna is one of the most sophisticated aspects among all the motorcycles we've tested. It was a big surprise that such a large motorcycle doesn't have a downshifter, and for me that's also a major drawback. I didn't think it would be such a big deal. Not so much off-road, but when you're on mixed terrain, it's really a hassle.
The price? We had 9 motorcycles at different price points. The range started with the CFMoto 450 MT, which is 27,000 zlotys, and ended with the Triumph 900 Rally Pro, which cost 76,000 zlotys according to the price list. Oh, sorry, there's also the DesertX, which is listed at 80,000 zlotys. So we have a huge price range here, and as a result, the equipment levels were also different. Listen, let's talk about off-roading when it comes to these 9 motorcycles we tested. I'll say this now, it's not very easy because there are quite a few bikes here that perform well off-road. There are a few that perform worse, but most ride well or very well. And it's very hard to compare them definitively. I'll put it this way, Husqvarna has the best suspension. I'm 100% convinced that if we started pushing the limits of the suspension, Husqvarna would come out on top. If we started riding over big bumps with jumps and so on, it would turn out that there would be no bottoming out, everything would work as it should, and it would still be precise. BMW would definitely lose out in this situation, and so would Triumph and many other motorcycles. However, here in Andalusia, the situation is that the terrain is mostly gravel, stones, some loose surfaces, a bit of sand here and there and so on, and here things don't go as smoothly for us. Honestly, for me, the most fun off-road was probably the Ducati because I think it's the biggest fun bike here, but very close behind is the BMW, which is very handy, very agile, the engine works great, and the electronics are brilliant. The Triumph is the master of comfort, even off-road. It also has nice stability, though it's a bit on the heavy side, as you'd expect. And the Husqvarna, when it comes to suspension, without a doubt, is top-notch. It's a bit unconventional, I would say. That's at least how I interpret the Husky. And that would definitely make up my top 4. These motorcycles, but right behind them, for example, is CFMoto, a very pleasant, positive bike. The 800, of course, they call it the 800C. The 450, listen to me, it's like a little Ténéré. You have to approach it with the mindset that it's an A2 category bike. Lighter, more maneuverable, obviously not a lot of horsepower, the brakes aren't great. It costs 27,000 zlotys, but it does somewhat resemble the Ténéré. That's kind of how I would rate it. Of course, the RK is also pretty high up when it comes to off-road capability, but with my approach, I wouldn't put it in the top 3. The Kawasaki off-road, well, damn, the lightness, that's obvious. The engine power, if we had to dig through some loose sand, tackle big climbs, or go through mud, it would definitely get out very quickly and even pick up speed because the weight is also good. But the suspension is stiff, no doubt about it. There's no electronics and the brake modulation is poor. So this suspension is just not well refined, is it? Tiger, a wonderful, pleasant, fantastic little engine that accelerates nicely. When I want to relax, I get on the Tiger, even off-road.
If I were choosing with heavy off-roading in mind, putting knobby tires on the bike, riding on technical trails, mud, there are also some great terrains here which we actually didn't ride on, but narrow paths, big rocks, the bike keeps falling over and so on. Without compromise, I would definitely choose the R version. But when it comes to the roads we mostly rode on, and asphalt, I think the Ducati and BMW are on a very similar level. They both offer a lot of fun to ride and will also handle most of the terrain you'll encounter here. But from a purely visual standpoint, unfortunately, I would have to choose the Ducati, because overall it just looks absolutely beautiful. And when it comes to the technical qualities and the sheer unadulterated pleasure of riding, it's just... But
the thing with the Ducati is that I've always kind of thought that this motorcycle is a bit too heavy, too big for off-road. The thing is, until I took it off-road for the first time, it turned out that I have the most fans on this motorcycle, probably more fans than on any other motorcycle, precisely because it has such strong torque. The most important thing for me was that the riding position is such that I just feel good on this motorcycle, you know? And I can stand upright, I don't have to lean over the handlebars so much. The pegs are nicely positioned.
It's easy to maneuver this Ducati motorcycle.
It's the biggest motorcycle, yet also the most balanced. Honestly, this motorcycle is so easy to handle, even though it's the biggest and the longest.
I'm a bit of a Ducati fan, everyone knows that, but still BMW, the power delivery, the engine that pulls from the very bottom, the precision of the brakes.
Because that's the downside of Ducati. And
both off-road and on asphalt. In my opinion, this motorcycle rides the best out of all of them.
For me, in the mid-range revs, Ducati is the best of all. Where do you also...
What kicks in?
I don't know what exactly kicks in there, but it's just so sweet. It's simply wonderful.
However, At the same time, the
Low end is a disaster. It's like the chain is jerking. But as for the...
overall meatiness, for me, that's Triumph. Everything there is like a symphony. Oh,
Yes, that's true.
like I was saying to Tomek today, I could sketch out a detailed graph of how the mechanical torque curve goes there. It's absolute poetry.
Listen, I wanted to say two things now. First, what you said, Adam, that Ducati is a minus in terms of that kind of performance, right? So if we're talking about the motorcycle's performance, it's hard. If you have an uphill or a certain road, it's actually difficult to find traction with this bike. So I wouldn't really call that a flaw. But for me, the most important thing is simply how this motorcycle delivers power to the rear wheel and how that translates into acceleration.
The most important thing is how it rides. But when you come in the morning, press the button and it's like, wait, is that actually true? Let me see.
I'm not really a fan of all of those different engines like the ones from KTM, so I prefer the Husky instead.
Kawa.
Because they run in such a way that I'm afraid something's going to fall apart in there.
But the Husky also runs quite smoothly.
But listen, now I'm going to say something to the Ducati guys. You might not agree, but for example, I mainly remember Ducati for its dry clutch.
Those were different times. And
now, if someone started up a Ducati and there was no rattling, it meant it was broken. That
it didn't start.
Yeah.
No, of course, I'm joking a bit here, but still, listen, despite that, those motorcycles did rattle. For some people, they ran, of course, terribly, but they were some of the best. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's exactly what I want to say now, that often it's not just some sound or what we first notice about the motorcycle that really translates to how it rides. The BMW rattles, you start it up in the morning, man, that sound isn't pleasant. But while
riding the BMW sounds nice,
because
Hazakrapovic.
Those Ducatis weren't exactly champions of reliability, and
unfortunately,
in adventure bikes, it's important that the motorcycle is reliable. Adam and I might be a bit biased when it comes to Ducati, so it was also hard for me to give certain opinions here, but I am a private user myself. I currently have 30,000 kilometers on mine, and honestly, these bikes run great. They're not the same dry clutch Ducatis from 15 years ago. It's really a different era for Ducati now. These days, you don't have to love Ducati to ride one. You can just use it like any other bike. With
the road, for me, Ducati rides the smoothest and is the most fun in the corners. Power, the way that power is delivered, and the brakes, these are the factors I personally consider when it comes to road riding. And Ducati has all of that combined. It has an amazing buttery smooth rev range, especially in the mid and high RPMs, which I absolutely love. It has fantastic brakes. There's Brembo, I think, with Tilima or something like that. The brake modulation is excellent, and the length of this motorcycle makes it fantastic for taking those long sweeping turns. I really think it just handles so stably. It's amazing, you know? So overall, it's definitely great on the road. The BMW is great too. I judge it a bit differently because I feel like it's a bit shorter, more compact. I even felt like I was riding a naked bike on the BMW. And it's also great here, just in a different way. The Ducati rides differently, right? The Ducati is like a long locomotive, and this one is just super compact, quick, and fun, you know?
The BMW is kind of... And that naked bike is inside the body of this GS. It is...
For the F900R.
In the F900R, where we have the same engine and a very comparable motorcycle build, so...
I'm just talking about my feelings. That's exactly how I felt, you know? Husqvarna, well, obviously power, there's a lot of horses, great suspension, and the brakes are fantastic too. And Triumph, right? Again, well, I'll say it again. It's a miracle for me when it comes to riding comfort. It also handles really nicely on the road. For example, when I was chasing you guys, like when you were pulling away from me because the sport riders were always leaving me behind, I kind of felt that the suspension was a bit too soft for me, you know? That when you really lean it over a lot and so on, the suspension would work a bit too much for me. It wasn't as precise as in the Triumph. There's a lot of travel there. It's 240, and that suspension is just so comfortable. Those were my impressions. The brake in the Triumph is super easy to modulate, and the engine is just sweet too, right? So my top three, I think, well, the differences are minor, right? It would be Ducati in first place when it comes to that. BMW definitely very close, or maybe right alongside, and maybe Triumph, maybe Husqvarna, something like that, you know? When it comes to asphalt riding,
everyone here praises the Triumph when it comes to riding on the road. For me, though, that motorcycle isn't particularly interesting. I mean, it's good, but it's so good that for me, it's actually a bit too boring. It handled really confidently, but neither the engine nor the chassis really stood out to me. I didn't feel any joy riding this motorcycle at all. And surprisingly, for example, I actually felt that joy when I got on the Ténéré. Maybe it's also because I use it myself every day. I said it was a weak motorcycle and so on, more suited for tough terrain. But when I got on it on the road, I had a really great time. You could have fun leaning gently into corners, even sliding a bit. You could feel it right away, but honestly, I still think Ducati comes out on top in all of this. Although BMW would also have a good chance, but in this case, it had the most aggressive tires. It's hard to say for sure because maybe it didn't allow for really hard acceleration and so on, so that kind of held it back a bit. Although when I was riding behind Adam was riding the GS, I was on the Husqvarna, and for me, the Husqvarna was a bad bike. I just didn't feel it at first. But I think that was the fastest I've ever ridden a motorcycle on the street in my life. And Adam was riding the GS on those weird tires, and it seemed like it didn't bother him at all. Maybe he just forgot.
If I had to judge which motorcycle handles best on asphalt, I'd pick the one that's the fastest at the limit all the time. And on the GS, he was definitely riding the fastest. It was the easiest to control, right?
You're asking about the best motorcycle on asphalt. The most effective one? The most efficient, meaning you'll get down the fastest? Or just the one that puts the biggest grin on your face?
For me, what makes the GS stand out? It's the riding position, the feel of the front, and above all, the electronics, because as Adrian said, those tires weren't the best. I twisted the throttle and it would just slide out sideways, but compared to other bikes, when they slide out, this one just keeps going. It's not like the traction control cuts all your power and you lose acceleration waiting for everything to calm down before the bike moves again. In my opinion, BMW combines a bit of all the models, meaning it takes some electronics from the sport bikes, the build from both the Naked and the GS, and they've created something really compact and versatile. And on the street, as we're all saying here, it really suits us. For me, it's also very comparable to Ducati. With Ducati, I really enjoyed the fact that maybe at first, at low revs, there wasn't that much acceleration, but then the torque kicks in and the Ducati just wants to go. I also found the seating position on the Ducati very comfortable, so it was great to feel the bike like that. However, for me, BMW comes first, then Ducati, and the third bike in this comparison would be the Husqvarna. For example, I'm the kind of person, the kind of rider, who really makes use of the brakes. I brake deep into the corner, even here on these knobby tires, where someone might say, oh, you won't have enough grip, or that you can't enter a corner on the brakes because the front will tuck in. I think that's not true, especially with such a great suspension as the Husqvarna has. For the most part, we were riding on very grippy asphalt, but not only that, so you can't really say that. And I think this suspension gives you a lot of support, so you can brake for a really long time if you use it skillfully. What this suspension allows you to do is brake late, then quickly get on the throttle because the rear is not too soft. It does not transfer everything onto the tire, which is not a street tire. It is more of a 50-50 off-road and road, so you can really take advantage of that. I honestly felt really good riding this motorcycle, and to my surprise, I was fast on it. Because when you all went out ahead of me, I was riding the Husqvarna, and I thought there would be a huge gap, that on this road I would be left behind. But that wasn't the case at all, because it has good power and you can really make use of that suspension. Still, I don't think it's for amateurs.
All KTMs are not easy motorcycles. You have to get used to all of them and really get the feel for them, but once you do and start to control it, they actually ride really well.
And I think it's like they give you something in return.
Yeah, if I have to go, say, 100 kilometers down there, take my wife with me, and God forbid some luggage, then without hesitation, I'd take the Triumph. It's got an incredibly smooth engine. I love that you start it up and it runs like a V6 to me. It's got this thick plush seat, so it's probably going to be very comfortable, and there's plenty of space for a passenger. For me, this Triumph combines suspension qualities that I previously thought were impossible to merge. The suspension is super comfortable, yet this motorcycle handles corners incredibly well, and honestly, if it weren't for the fact that it's a bit heavy when switching sides compared to, for example, compared to a Ducati, I really feel like the front tire is just glued to the asphalt, and it gives me an amazing feeling of stability. So as I said, for those long trips, I always choose the Triumph. Now, when it comes to what we were actually doing here, shorter rides on big twisties and so on, it's really close for me between the BMW and the Ducati. But still, I give a slight edge to the Ducati because here, where the roads are very winding, in my opinion, no motorcycle changes direction as quickly as the Ducati. It's true that the Triumph gave me a bit more of that feeling of front-end grip, but the speed at which the Ducati leans into corners is just incredible to me. The brake is definitely the best on the Triumph when it comes to modulation and braking power. It's just pure poetry. With the Ducati, I felt like there were some crappy brake pads installed, or maybe they were already overheated or had been through water or something. For me, the BMW is literally just, pardon my language, but it is just a hair behind the Ducati. What bothers me a bit is the very stiff gearbox action in the BMW, and for some reason, when lifting it up, it feels quite heavy to me. The Ducati, on the other hand, feels much lighter and more nimble to handle, and that is exactly how I see my top 3 rankings.
I had a slightly different impression. I always thought that Ducati handles best on asphalt out of all the bikes in this segment because I had experience with them before, but I had never ridden the new GS 900. And for me, this GS is the most agile of all these motorcycles. It's the easiest to control, it delivers power the best, and everything is so precise that when you put it all together and start riding really fast, it was just an amazing pleasure to ride, and I felt like I had 100% control. I think that the DesertX and the Tiger are more comfortable bikes on asphalt. I find riding these bikes on asphalt almost equally enjoyable. I definitely have more fun on the DesertX than on the Tiger, but the Tiger is just super comfortable. We also have this Tiger for our asphalt trips here. A very
comfortable motorcycle in every way. A lot of couples ride this one.
Because I think that if we were to do an overall classification, like for a bike to have at home, you bring it here on a trailer, you go to the mountains, you take your wife out to dinner and so on, then the Triumph would probably win here, right?
Triumph did something interesting. They gave it a very sharp steering head angle, and because of that, this motorcycle gives you the feeling that it handles corners really well. But sometimes, at higher speeds, this can cause some instability, or it could be that the suspension just can't keep up because it has to handle greater forces.
Yeah, where there's a lot of compression, you don't notice that there are 20 to 40 millimeters of travel, and suddenly when you look, there's barely any left, right? When you're riding, it's really...
I mean, to be honest, I'm actually pretty light, but obviously, Tomek, you carry a bit more weight with you, because I'm just a bit smaller.
Riding double.
Just like when I was talking with Tomek, we had completely different impressions because, for example, when I'm riding off-road and I was also debating between Ducati and BMW, for me, BMW wins when it comes to the standing position, but for Tomek, it's exactly the opposite.
Exactly. I was too cramped.
It's also a matter of body build, preferences, and so on. Gentlemen,
the question is, which motorcycle surprised you the most? Actually,
I was surprised by the CFMoto 800 MTX because it was better than I expected, and in my opinion, even much more enjoyable and cooler than the Cove, even though it is the same engine. For me,
I was negatively surprised by the Cove because I had been very positively inclined towards it before, and I even considered whether I should sell the Ténéré and buy the Cove. But now I know for sure that I definitely won't do that.
Personally, I was positively surprised by the Triumph because I had placed it more in the class of motorcycles that just can't handle off-road, but it turned out that it actually does quite well, and the way it rides on the road is just fantastic. I never really experienced a negative surprise, but I agree with Pesh that this is a big disappointment and that motorcycle needs a lot of refinement. Well, I also have to agree with Bua here that for me the positive surprise was the Triumph. Because when I looked at this motorcycle, mainly at its specs, I thought, okay, it's heavy but powerful, delivers power nicely, it'll be great on the road, and it really is because on asphalt it handles amazingly. And off-road, it really surprised me in a positive way because I expected it to be much harder. It's actually really easy for me, it handles nicely. So if I had to mention something that surprised me negatively, it would be the power delivery, and secondly, the electronics in the CFMoto. Like yesterday, what maybe didn't exactly discourage me but did surprise me was that when I wanted to simply turn the motorcycle around with the handlebars fully locked, there was no pressure or anything. I wanted to gently use the brake, but it wouldn't let me.
For me, definitely a negative surprise as well, because just like Adrian, I thought it was
very
good on paper. And here I am disappointed. The CFMoto 450 definitely surprised me. This motorcycle for that price and with that engine is, first of all, a big bike, because I felt comfortable on it despite my height, and I really think it holds up well. The engine sounds nice.
The suspension bottoms out.
Just like you said, and definitely the GS was a positive surprise. An amazing motorcycle. It was my first time riding it.
Well, yeah, but I expected that the BMW and Ducati would be good, right? Because let's be honest, it's pretty rare for them not to be. But here, this was a brand completely unknown to me because I had never ridden this Cove before. And also, well, I have to admit that the C in the big moto, the 800K, also really surprised me in a positive way because it's a motorcycle that honestly lacks very little to be at the top, and at the price it has, it's incredibly effective. What connects many of these motorcycles? And what I don't understand is that on a motorcycle you take off-road, you can't turn off all the systems. That's just, for me,
incomprehensible. And it would be best if you could do it while riding, right?
The fact that you can't turn off the front ABS, like Kamil was saying when he was turning around and so on. Oh,
it's really different with that ABS, isn't it? Some people are afraid to turn it off. I get it.
But you leave that...
On some motorcycles, you can't even disable the TC.
Yeah, that's true. But you leave that decision up to the rider, right?
I think on the Transalp,
at that very particular moment in time when...
I wanted to say this now, so yeah. For me, what Triumph does, for example, or Honda, makes sense. For me, it's not useless that when you turn off the ignition, the motorcycle goes back to road settings. All the systems turn back on. we're off-road, we take a break and come back. But for example, from my own experience, I have a situation where I come back with the motorcycle. Just as an example, I come back from off-road, all the systems are turned off, I park it in the garage, I take a longer break, and then a month later I go out again, I'm in a hurry, getting dressed quickly, rushing somewhere, I want to ride on the road, and again I set off without those systems, and that can be dangerous.
Camille, you're right, but the way we used them, it always ended up with the motorcycles left with the ignition on all the time because it annoyed everyone. Look.
Camille, one thing, when those systems are turned off, two big indicator lights are always on.
And
You see, and I had something like that on the Triumph where I turned it off, then turned it off again, thinking it was still in off-road mode. And as I was going up a hill, the traction control cut me off so much that I just...
On the other hand, maybe it's actually safer for them, the control.
traction control is nothing, but if you were going downhill and the ABS kicked in, you could end up hitting a tree or going off a cliff.
One of the advantages is that you can permanently turn off traction control and ABS because...
It asks
about it.
You have to stop and read the entire regulations.
But honestly, what's really the point if you are not even going to ride it just because it's so weak? I mean, really...
Since we're still comparing quickly, I wanted to say one last thing, because I know we're running short on time. The CFMoto 450, in my opinion, has a lot of flaws, but for an experienced person who wants to ride it really fast. A huge advantage of this motorcycle is that if someone wants to start their adventure with motorcycles, the price is super competitive, it's really good. You get a motorcycle that you can ride in a parade and you can take off-road without any problem because it has all the necessary features, right? It is definitely suitable for that. So I think that's a big plus if someone wants to start out. And it's not a motorcycle that you'll necessarily have forever, right? But it's one that will lead you into the world of motorcycles or even the world of adventure in general.
CFMoto 450 MT. So we have a weight that's lower than almost all of those other motorcycles. It's 190 kilograms fully fueled. We have suspension travel at the 200 millimeter level, which is actually very close to the Ténéré. And it's Kayaba, which works pretty well. A large fuel tank, and we have a 452 twin-cylinder engine, which is extremely rare. Only some Honda and so on do that. Then we have a motorcycle with 21 and 18-inch wheels, which is a typical adventure setup, so you can put on whatever tires you want. And it's in the A2 license category. And the price is 26,000.
Exactly. With this CFMoto, you can go to exactly the same places as you would with a DesertX or a BMW, which is 3 times more expensive. But I wouldn't be surprised if you could actually cover even more and tougher terrain with this CFMoto than with those much pricier bikes.
Yes, you're right. I'd like just one sentence from each of you about each motorcycle so we can learn about the different bikes. The Honda Transalp, just like you mentioned at the beginning.
For me, it delivers power really well. It's strong. It's a universal motorcycle. You can just ride it anywhere. It doesn't have any standout strengths, but it's suitable for everything. For me, the Transalp is still a Transalp, meaning what was made many, many years ago has just been carried over to 2025. And in my opinion, that's its biggest downside. I mean, just like the XT600 Ténéré from the 1990s was basically a couch with a single-cylinder engine that had 40 horsepower and was slow, now the Ténéré is practically a sales hit. It's a fantastic motorcycle that rides like a Dakar bike, handles great in corners, is precise, and so on. And the Transalp is still basically the same Transalp, just with a more modern engine and a few gadgets. And in my opinion, that's the biggest downside of this motorcycle. It would have been enough if they had done what Ténéré did. And then it would be a great motorcycle because the engine is really nice. For
me, it just seems uninteresting in the sense that I didn't find any aspect of it that would make me want this motorcycle. The engine is fine. It delivers power nicely. It's smooth. It handles well. It's okay, but you don't feel like this motorcycle will give you any real fun from riding it. I'd say it's more of a motorcycle for a 50 or 60-year-old who goes mushroom picking. I don't feel like this is a bike I'd want to ride around Spain on, through the curves and on gravel roads.
But with a basket for mushrooms?
To finish, I'd like to ask you one question. The most important one in this test, really. Which motorcycle right now is the one you just go out and buy?
I don't know why, but I'll pick the Ducati. However, for me, as with most of these classes and different segments we've discussed, it's Ducati, BMW, and Triumph. I think in that order, these are definitely complete motorcycles. Unfortunately, also the most expensive, but that price gives us something extra. All of these motorcycles have excellent electronics. Basically, they all handle really well. We're choosing between nuances here. Somewhere the riding position is just a bit nicer, somewhere else just a bit... I might not like the BMW because of the way it shifts gears, the gearbox is a bit stiff, but these are minor differences. Maybe it's a bit out of sentiment for the brand. Maybe there are some arguments that were more important to me, but honestly, by a slight margin, I choose the Italian one.
For myself, I would choose the BMW F900GS, because I know it would suit my needs best. considering the specific way that I ride and everything this motorcycle allows me to do. I know for a fact that I would actually make the absolute most use of it out of the entire range we have tested here today, and that is not just because of the simple fact that I left it behind earlier. I rode the BMW almost at the end of our test, and I had the most fun on it, so that also gives me the urge to want this motorcycle. Secondly, we did a lot of off-roading here, and I still can't get enough of it. With the other motorcycles, I can say, okay, I've gotten what I wanted out of them, and I more or less know what they...
If I can interrupt you, Camille, because I didn't mention something that I think is very important. What really captivates me about the BMW is that I love the dashboard, the ease of use. Even though I'm not a regular BMW user, for me, it's a motorcycle you just get on and quickly find your way around the settings. There are quick options to turn off ABS and traction control. I think the Germans did this the best.
For me, yes, my heart would probably choose Ducati, but the way I felt off-road on the BMW, I think the riding position is great. I felt more confident, the handlebars are wide, and ultimately the off-road experience tipped the scales so that I would probably choose the BMW in the end. Because on asphalt it's just as fast, but I think off-road it would beat the Ducati. I never thought I'd say this, but out of all of them, I think I'd ultimately buy the GS. But even so, I'm still really curious about the cow, and I'd really like to ride one that's been tweaked a bit by someone, because I've heard that this motorcycle can ride a bit differently than the one we got straight out of the box.
With the cow, listen, it's true that because of the emission standards, they have different mappings. Some exhaust, those intakes and so on. So to set it up in a way that makes it more enjoyable, you definitely need to buy a kit from the manufacturer or importer, one that's a bit non-homologated, right?
But Tomek, you can do the same thing with other motorcycles. What happens with the others if you ignore the standards?
I just suspect that they did it in some cheap way.
With
their own solutions and so on. I deliberately jumped the queue because it was like this: Ducati, BMW, Tomek.
Besides, as Camille said, he's an encyclopedia of knowledge, and I'm glad I got to meet you, because Tomek and I were in touch the whole time here, and we exchanged a lot of opinions. Tomek's story is especially great because he actually wants to buy a motorcycle. And he, a man who has traveled across half the entire world on these rugged adventure bikes, suddenly came to some very interesting new conclusions right here, because all of these impressive motorcycles were gathered in one single place, and surely what he felt here in this moment will deeply influence his future choice. I mean, when you think about it...
Some indicator will say something else, and it turned out to be BMW, but I didn't want to say BMW. Because the thing is, I really enjoy riding the desert, but I've already had a desert, and I customized it for myself. I even changed the suspension to the kind I like, because I enjoy modifying motorcycles to suit my preferences. And I was really happy with it, but things happened the way they did, and I ended up selling it. And I don't really want to go back to the same thing again. And BMW really surprised me in a positive way, especially since we had the chance to switch between bikes. And I'll be honest, as of today, I think I would probably choose the BMW. Unfortunately, and I regret it a bit, but that's just how it is. However, so as not to sound too sweet, let me say this. I would definitely buy a BMW with the better suspension than the one we had, because I know the ones we had would wear out quickly. I would definitely change the riding position a bit, because for me, even though the foot pegs were lowered here, I still found the position too hunched over. Definitely a higher seat, because this one was both too soft and too hard, you know, and a bit too low. And I think I'd put an 18-inch wheel in the back, right? Instead of a 17-inch. That would be really badass. But I'm looking at the motorcycle strictly from an off-road perspective, because for me, it was a bike meant mainly for off-roading with some asphalt riding to get there.
But yesterday on the way back, you were really close to the Husqvarna.
Yes, that's an interesting point too, because honestly, I found the Husqvarna quite nice to ride. The suspension really impresses me in the Husqvarna, in the sense that it's the best of all of them, no question about it. Plus the brakes and the engine, which accelerates really nicely. What I missed in the Husqvarna was the electronics from the KTM. I don't know if that's somehow related, but I don't think it is, because in the KTM Adventure R version, you have the option to set traction control in 9 levels, whereas here there was no such option at all. I think that would be a great solution. I actually like the Husqvarna more than the KTM, so the Husqvarna was nicer, although that big windscreen bothers me a bit when it comes to off-road riding.
You've already made your choice, which of course surprised me. How are you going to cope with the fact that this engine is going to rattle on you?
Yeah, I know, I definitely know.
He'll turn on some music.
A loud exhaust?
I don't like that. Listen, for many years I rode an Africa Twin and I loved it. I had an Africa Twin and I thought Honda's engine character was just great, you know? And I don't like that rattling, but as you said yourself, how it rides is more important than how it sounds, right? It's about the experience. Ducati doesn't sound the nicest either, as
Radia used to say.
I
If I had to choose a motorcycle just for one person, if I had, let's say, a second one in the garage, one for traveling on asphalt with two people, I'd also go for the GS Adventure. I felt the most confident, I had the most fun. Maybe the standing position is a bit awkward, the tank here is quite wide.
On the climbs,
that was a bit of a downside, but honestly it's a really great motorcycle, and both off-road and on asphalt I felt the most confident and rode the fastest. And I had the most fun, and that's always been the most important thing for me in motorcycles. However, if I had to choose, if I didn't have that second motorcycle, the one for asphalt, I'd probably go with the Triumph. It's such a super versatile motorcycle. You can really take it on a trip around Europe with two people and panniers. You can also go for a ride in the woods with your buddies. Or maybe the DesertX, because the DesertX is kind of in between the BMW, since it gives you a lot of fun while riding, and the Triumph, because it's also...
Before I go to the store and say I want a BMW, I'll wait until they show the new DZX.
The brand new one, right here.
The new DZX, the new VCOM, 15 kilograms lighter.
Gentlemen, we know our choice is the best motorcycle here. Which of these motorcycles would you recommend to someone who is just starting their adventure, not with motorcycles in general, because they're already an experienced rider, but entering the adventure segment for the first time? Would your recommendations for such people differ from what you chose for yourselves? So,
if you want to play it safe, if you're still not sure but you want to give it a try, then CFMoto, right? Because after all, the price, and you can do everything with this motorcycle that you can with other brands, so it's a great way to start, to see if this is really your thing, if you're going to get into it at all, if you even want to do it. And if you're looking for something so future-proof that, for example, I don't know, you've done some tests and you know you'll be riding it, well, I'd go for a BMW or a Husqvarna or a Triumph. Husqvarna.
I think it's a bit difficult to start the adventure. I would probably prefer to go to TNR.
If it's for long trips, it might be a bit tough with the TNR, especially with two people. If it's for a beginner, for me, the CFMoto 450, I
would approach this topic a bit differently, or even frame it differently altogether. I think that the motorcycles we had here can be divided into those that are a bit easy and those that are a bit difficult. And for example, among the easy motorcycles, which are accessible to almost everyone in terms of riding requirements, definitely the 450 KMT, and for sure the Transalp is a pleasant, easy motorcycle that you just get on and ride, and you'll definitely handle everything without any problems. The Ténéré also is not the kind of motorcycle that presents any significant difficulties in any way. Unfortunately, I would definitely have to put the Kawa at the absolute opposite end of the performance spectrum for very obvious reasons. The throttle control, so it's a very difficult motorcycle to master, and that's definitely how I would approach it. But what I would certainly take into account is the unique opportunity to put these machines through their paces and test them thoroughly, which we did. Because from my personal experience, I thought these motorcycles handled and performed in a noticeably different manner back when I used to ride them more frequently. For example, after riding one for a week, I thought it was like this or like that, but when I switched to another motorcycle after an hour of riding in the same terrain, or do the same thing on twisty roads, I have a completely different comparison. And of course, I still think, for example, that the suspension on this one is like this, or on that one it's like that. But these differences start to shift in favor of one or the other. I think that for anyone looking for a solution or an idea for their motorcycle, unfortunately, you should look for places where you can test motorcycles one after another. I'll brag a little and say that, for example, such a place is Adventure Fest, which I organize, where we have several importers, several brands, and you can ride one after another. Another such place is Love for Ride, where you have to visit Adam and you have access to several motorcycles and you can ride them alternately. That completely changes the situation.
Every such test, or even what we just did now, can point you in a certain direction, but my personal recommendation, just as Tomek also said, is that you should test these motorcycles yourself. And if you have the opportunity, like the one offered here by the guys, especially Adam, to compare one motorcycle after another in a single place, then I think there's nothing better than that.
The coolest thing is that here you get to compare motorcycles not only off-road, like at most events where it's either just asphalt or just off-road. And here you'll find some of the best asphalt roads you can probably ride on anywhere in Europe. And on top of that, you'll ride through some great off-road terrain with both more challenging and easier trails to choose from. So I think this test can definitely be carried out in all its glory, not just in some kind of sterilized conditions. Sterile.
Additionally, in weather conditions where we ride here all year round with sunshine and pleasant weather, and of course in conditions where we're not just, unloading in the morning, quickly hopping on the bikes, but we actually have some comfortable accommodation. I think, well, for me, it's important to be able to rest comfortably somewhere, to get some enjoyment out of the trip and to draw joy from it, because with a well-rested mind, you approach riding differently and you can get even more pleasure out of it.
We organize these vacations with the use of motorcycles precisely so that people can actually come here and consciously see how these motorcycles ride and choose the one that's better for them. This is
The most conscious choice. Some people
actually come here. These are people who are looking for a motorcycle from a specific segment, but there are also many people who simply come to have fun with these motorcycles, to experience a motorcycle vacation where they can ride various cool bikes on different great roads. Very often, in fact, almost every time, these choices are highly subjective when it comes to motorcycles. It's not like the whole group picks the same one.
I, for example, have noticed that there are people who are so pumped with adrenaline that they only want those kinds of bikes, and there are others who just want to chill and take it slow and so on.
You could say every motorcyclist is different.
That's why it's great that we have so many brands and so many options, so we can find the perfect bike for every rider.
What's really cool these days is that all motorcycles are good, and that's exactly why it's hard to choose.
We look for little details. That's why we complain about this or that bike. I'm not trying to say that this is a terrible motorcycle, because that's not the point. 15 years ago, this would have been absolutely top-notch. Personally, I ride a Ducati 1260 from 2020, and honestly, if we put it here, it would probably be the worst handling bike of the bunch. That's how much things have advanced, and that's just in 5 years. And probably this Chinese bike, well.
All right, if we meet again in a year and also bring Chinese motorcycles, do you think they'll still be lagging behind?
It's good that Chinese manufacturers are making better and better motorcycles, and they're almost on par with the European and Japanese ones, let's say. Because I hope this will make the competition start making even better motorcycles. And that prices will go down. And that will only benefit us, the motorcyclists, because motorcycles will keep getting better. This
will put pressure on those European and Japanese brands, which will start to feel it. It's certain that the motorcycle market will change. I think we are all aware of that. It'll be interesting to see which direction it goes, and I hope it goes in a way that will make all of us very happy.
I think definitely. Look, these motorcycles are already remarkably good, though they are not quite as refined as the established Japanese and European models just yet. But you have to remember that these specific brands were only actually created about 2 years ago. I'm just honestly impressed by how far they have come in such a short time.
I just hope that our dear European authorities won't cause these motorcycles to partially disappear, because unfortunately, what we see, and it pains us here, definitely Camille, Adrian and me, is that in sport motorcycles, certain models are no longer being offered on the market.
Don't cry, I can already hear your voice breaking.
Yeah, a little bit. Unfortunately, there are already many we won't be able to buy anymore. I'm afraid this will happen more and more often. But
in Europe, because maybe only in the States.
Because we can't buy the Desert anymore either, right?
Gentlemen, it was a real pleasure having you here. It was great riding together. Thank you for sharing your opinions. I think we did a really nice test together. Thank you to the viewers for watching. This was quite a long piece and it took a while, but I hope it was something valuable for you. Choosing a motorcycle is a very subjective matter, and I wanted to invite you, if you're looking for a bike in this segment or another one, since we also do other tests, to check us out. It's great to come to us and test out the motorcycles. I think my colleagues here can confirm that, not just to test them out,
but also, listen, from my perspective, the routes that Adam knows here, especially the adventure ones, because you can look at a map and plan a road, but it's hard to find your way off-road. So I recommend it to anyone who wants to come and discover some of these routes.
I've been here for 6 years now with the Love for Ride team, and I think we know this area better than anyone else, probably better than anyone who's ever been here. It's interesting because in this area where we ride all the time, I think I'm the only one who leads tours here for people from all over the world. During all these days here, we haven't met anyone on the road.
Goats.
Only farmers and banana growers.
The goats?
And border collies. Yeah.
All right, since we're complementing each other, I'll add a couple of words too. I really like the asphalt routes here because they're different from the ones in the Alps. For example, in the Alps, you have constant hairpin turns that, well, those hairpins aren't anything special. I don't like hairpins where you have to drop down to second gear just to make the turn and keep going and so on. Here we have beautiful, long, and often sometimes tighter curves, and the motorcycle just glides through the corners. Not on hairpins, but on real curves. And then there are the views, right?
And there are some nice examples and so on.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Left, right, left.
Right. There's a lot of that. The elevation changes and everything. It's just...
And Adam is pretty crazy. Just the terrain itself.
We're wrapping up.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Basically, it's October, mid-October, and the weather is just stunning. It's 28 degrees today, but it's actually too hot, I'd say. I already know Spain a bit, but this place is completely new to me, so I'm really happy about it.
The roads here have an incredible amount of grip, and the motorcycles we're riding offer such exceptional comfort and traction that these winding curves are just remarkably and absolutely wonderful to experience. We feel a bit like we're on a roller coaster.
At first we had some easier routes and then you could say intermediate ones. I think the versatility of this Husqvarna is incredible.
And being able to have fun on these motorcycles is phenomenal, because in Poland you definitely won't experience anything like this. Curves like these, grip like this, and so little traffic.
The weather is wonderful, the area is wonderful. We're about to switch to the next motorcycles, hop on, compare. It's just beautiful.
For me, you can truly feel the versatility of adventure motorcycles only in conditions like these.
It really is amazing.